The water was black as oil and twice as cold when Rosa Martínez finally let go of the branch she'd been clinging to for 3 hours. She could still hear them screaming, or maybe that was just a river, the Rio Grande's current playing tricks on her exhausted mind. For people had entered the water with her group. Only 2 had made it to the Texas side. The others were somewhere downstream, swept away in darkness while their cries for help grew fainter and fainter until it was only the sound of rushing water. But she was getting ahead of herself, starting at the end when the real crime happened at the beginning. At 2 a.m. on that April night, when 9 desperate people stood on the Mexican bank of the Rio Grande, staring at empty water where a boat should have been. Rosa's journey to that riverbank had started 6 months earlier in San Salvador, in the small restaurant she'd run for 15 years. The extortion demands came first, weekly payments that grew larger each month. When she couldn't pay, they burned her kitchen. When she went to the police, they burned her home. When she still refused to close, they showed her a photo of her teenage daughter walking to school. That photo made the decision. Within a week, she'd sold everything, borrowed from everyone, scraped together the money that would buy her daughter's safety. $10,000, the price for a premium crossing that promised comfort, safety, and most importantly, success. The coyote called himself El Profesor, a name that suggested education and reliability. He dressed well, spoke smoothly, showed testimonials from a satisfied client on his phone. His operation was professional. He claimed, no walking through deserts, no hiding in trucks, just a simple boat ride across the Rio Grande at a narrow point where the current was calm and border patrol presence minimal. She met the others at a motel in Reynosa, all clutching the same desperate hope. There was Ana, a nurse from Honduras whose son had leukemia and needed treatment unavailable at home. The Gutierrez family, parents and 2 adult children, fleeing cartel violence in Michoacan. Diego, a young engineer from Guatemala. Tomas, an older man who said little but whose eyes held too much pain. 9 people, $90,000 between them. Enough money to buy houses, start businesses, change lives. Instead, handed over to a well-dressed liar for a promise of safe passage. El Profesor's assistants moved them from the motel at midnight. 2 vans, careful routes avoiding checkpoints, everyone silent with anticipation. They were given black clothing, told to leave behind anything reflective or noisy. The crossing point was an hour outside the city, a stretch of river bordered by thick brush on both sides. The plan was simple. A motorboat would be waiting at 2 a.m. sharp. The crossing would take 10 minutes. On the Texas side, another associate would meet them with a van. By dawn, they'd be in Houston, calling relatives, beginning their new lives. El Profesor himself wouldn't cross. Too risky for someone of his importance, but his best men would handle everything. They reached the riverbank at 1:45 a.m. The assistants led them through paths worn smooth by thousands of crossings, whispering warnings about rattlesnakes and border patrol sensors. The river was louder than Rosa had expected, swollen with spring rains upstream. But she trusted the plan. $10,000 bought expertise, bought safety. At 2 a.m. exactly, they reached the designated spot. A small clearing, tire tracks in the mud, empty water bottles scattered about. Clearly a regular crossing point. The lead assistant checked his phone, nodded, pointed to where the boat would appear. They waited. 2:15 a.m. No boat. The assistant made hushed phone calls, his body language shifting from confident to concerned. Technical delays, he said. Any minute now. 2:30 a.m. Still nothing. More phone calls, now urgent. The assistant walked away from the group, voice rising despite attempts to stay quiet. When he returned, his face was different, the professional mask slipping. 2:45 a.m. The truth became undeniable. There was no boat coming. There had never been a boat. El Profesor wasn't answering calls. The money was gone. They'd been abandoned on the banks of the Rio Grande with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the bitter taste of betrayal. The Gutierrez father lunged at the assistant, had to be held back by his children. Ana collapsed to her knees, sobbing about her sick son, the treatments he needed, the money that represented his only chance. Diego paced the shoreline, calculating distances, depths, possibilities. Tomas stood perfectly still, unsurprised, like a man who'd expected betrayal all along. Rosa felt hollow. Not angry, not yet, just empty. $10,000. Her restaurant, her home, her life's work converted to cash and handed to a criminal. Her daughter was safe for now, staying with relatives, but for how long? Without money to establish herself in America, to send support home, what would happen? The assistants fled around 3 a.m., melting into the darkness when it became clear the group's shock was turning to rage. 9 people abandoned at the river's edge, their American dreams converted to a cruel joke. Some wanted to return to Reynosa immediately. Others argued for waiting until dawn. A few stared at the river, measuring the distance with desperate eyes. It was Diego who said first. They were already here, already at the border. The river was high, but not impossible. People crossed without boats all the time. They could make it if they were careful, if they helped each other. What was the alternative? Return to countries they fled. Explain to families that the money was gone. Face whatever violence or poverty had driven them here in first place. The debate was short. Desperation won, as it always does. They formed a human chain, strongest swimmers on the outside, weaker ones protected in the middle. Rosa positioned herself between Ana and one of the Gutierrez children. The plan was to enter at a calmer spot upstream. Let the current carry them diagonally to the opposite bank. Stay together. Stay calm. Trust each other since they could trust nothing else. The water was shockingly cold. Rosa gasped as it reached her waist, her chest, her neck. The current was stronger than it looked from shore, insistent, pulling at their chain. Diego led the way, fighting to keep them on course. Behind him, the others struggled to maintain contact, hands gripping clothes, arms, whatever they could reach. Halfway across, the formation broke. It happened fast. The Gutierrez son lost his footing, went under, came up sputtering and disoriented. His mother reached for him, breaking her hold on the chain. The current seized them immediately, spinning them away from the group. Their screams pierced the night as they were swept downstream, 2 dark shapes against darker water. Panic destroyed what remained of their coordination. Ana tried to swim back to shore, but the current was too strong. Tomas, the quiet one, simply let go, surrendering to the river with a calmness that suggested this had always been his plan. Rosa found herself alone, fighting water that seemed determined to pull her under. She grabbed a branch, a piece of driftwood caught against a rock, and held on with strength born of pure terror. The water raged around her, trying to tear her loose. She could hear the others somewhere in the darkness. Diego shouting instructions, Ana screaming for help, the gradually fading voices of those being carried away. Time lost meaning. There was only cold current and a burning in her arms as she clung to the branch. Her body went numb, hypothermia setting in. Several times she nearly let go, seduced by the promise of rest. But her daughter's face kept appearing in her mind. The girl needed her mother. Even a failed mother was better than none. When dawn finally came, painting the river pink and gold, Rosa could see the devastation. She was only 20 yards from the Texas bank, but might as well have been miles away. The current had her pinned against the branch. Her strength was gone. 2 bodies floated past, face down, unrecognizable. That's when she saw Diego on the opposite shore. He'd made it across, was building a pile of branches, planning something. He entered the water again, not swimming, but wading, using a long stick to probe for footing. The current fought him, but he persisted, creating a human bridge. He reached her as the last of her strength failed. His hands replaced hers on the branch, his voice urgent in her ear. Push off, swim for shore. He'd hold the branch steady. She had nothing left but tried anyway, dog paddling through water that felt thick as concrete. Her feet found mud, then solid ground. She crawled onto Texas soil and collapsed. Diego followed moments later. They lay gasping on the bank, 2 survivors of a group of 9. As the sun rose higher, they could see bodies caught in debris downstream. The Gutierrez parents, still holding hands. Tomas, peaceful in death as he'd never been in life. Ana wasn't visible, perhaps carried further by the current. Border Patrol found them an hour later. Rosa was too exhausted to run, too broken to care. The agents were professional, even kind, wrapping them in blankets, offering water. They'd seen this before, would see it again. The river took its toll regardless of policies, or walls, or presidential administrations. At the processing center, Rosa learned the full scope of the tragedy. For confirmed dead, 3 missing, presumed drowned. Only she and Diego had survived, and Diego was in the hospital with severe hypothermia. The news mentioned it briefly. 7 migrants drowned in Rio Grande crossing. No names, no stories, no mention of El Profesor or the $90,000 he'd stolen. They held her for 2 weeks while lawyers argued about her case. She told them everything, the extortion, the threats, the photo of her daughter. It didn't matter. Economic refugees and asylum seekers were processed differently, and burning restaurants didn't qualify as persecution under current interpretation. The flight back to El Salvador was full of deportees. Rosa recognized the look in their eyes, the hollow stare of people who'd risked everything and lost. Some would try again. Others were broken beyond repair. She didn't know which category she belonged to yet. Her sister met her at the airport, crying with relief and disappointment. Rosa had left as a business owner with a plan. She returned with nothing but the clothes the detention center had given her and memories of bodies floating in black water. The gangs were waiting. Of course. Word travels fast in San Salvador. The woman who'd refused to pay, who'd fled rather than submit, was back. The message needed to be clear. Examples needed to be made. She had 48 hours to leave the city or face consequences. So she fled again, this time internally. A cousin in the countryside took her in. She found work in the fields, bent over crops from dawn to dusk, earning in a week what her restaurant used to make in an hour. Her daughter joined her, their reunion bittersweet. The girl had questions Rosa couldn't answer. Why had she left? What happened to the money? Would they try again? At night, Rosa dreamed of water, black, rushing, endless. She could still feel the current pulling at her, still hear the screams of those swept away. The Gutierrez family, together even in death. Ana, whose son would now face leukemia without his mother. Tomas, who'd chosen the river over whatever he was running from. And always El Profesor. She looked him up online, found his social media still active, still advertising safe crossings. New testimonials from satisfied customers. New promises of boats and safety. New groups gathering in Reynosa motels, counting out their life savings for a lie. She wanted to warn them, but who would listen? Hope makes people deaf to warnings. Every migrant believes their coyote is different, their plan foolproof, their crossing blessed. Nobody pays $10,000 to be abandoned at the river's edge. Nobody plans to become a statistic. The rainy season came, swelling the Rio Grande even higher. Rosa followed the news obsessively, counting drownings. Each body recovered might be someone from her group. Ana had never been found. Sometimes Rosa imagined her surviving, making it to Houston, getting treatment for her son. Beautiful lies to balance the horrible truths. Diego wrote once, a letter forwarded to the Red Cross. He'd been deported to Guatemala, but made it back to the U.S. within months, crossing at a different point with a different coyote. He was in California now, working construction, sending money home. He remembered that night, would always remember, but couldn't let it stop him. The only way to honor the dead was to live. Rosa kept the letter but couldn't respond. What would she say? That she was picking coffee for pennies? That her daughter asked daily when they'd have their own home again? That she woke every night at 2 a.m., the exact time they stood at the river's edge, waiting for a boat that never existed? Sometimes she calculated the mathematics of that night. 9 people at $10,000 each. $90,000 for a boat ride that would have cost maybe $100 in fuel. El Profesor probably paid his assistants a few hundred each. The rest was pure profit, built on desperation and geography. The cruelest part was a hope. Even now, even after everything, Rosa caught herself planning. Maybe she could save enough for another attempt. Find a more reliable coyote. Cross at a better spot. The pull of America remained strong, fed by the knowledge that she'd touched Texas soil, however briefly. She'd made it across once. She could do it again, But then she'd remember the water, the cold, the current, the screams growing fainter. Diego's desperate rescue, the bodies floating past at dawn. 7 people dead because a well-dressed man had promised them a boat. 7 lives ended in black water. Their last thoughts probably of families who'd never know exactly what happened. Her daughter grew taller, learned to hide disappointment behind polite smiles. Rosa aged rapidly, field work and grief carving lines in her face. They survived, which was more than many could say. But survival and living were different things, and Rosa wasn't sure which side of that line she fell on anymore. 2 years later, she heard El Profesor had been arrested, not for the abandoned migrants or stolen money, but for tax evasion. He'd spent 3 months in jail, paid a fine, returned to business. The river kept flowing. Desperate people kept gathering at its banks. Some had boats, some didn't. The mathematics of hope versus reality remained constant. Rosa Martínez had paid $10,000 to cross the Rio Grande at night. The boat hadn't been waiting. For people, maybe more, had died because of that absence. She'd survived by clinging to a branch for 3 hours, saved by a fellow victim who'd risked the current twice. She carried all of it now, the weight of water, the pull of a current, the echo of screams, the dawn light on bodies, the empty space where a boat should have been. $10,000 converted to tragedy, measured in tears and years, and the growing distance between who she'd been and who the river had made her. Some borders are made of water. Some are made of the people who never emerged from that water. Rosa had crossed both, survived both, been broken by both. The Rio Grande flowed on, indifferent to the lives it claimed, waiting for the next group to stand on its banks at 2 a.m., staring at darkness where salvation should have been.